Hi everyone, my name is Caitlin Lynch and I'm going to be presenting the third portion of our project on promoting positive behavior and facilitating social skills using the text Teaching Students with Special Needs in the Inclusive Classroom by Diane Bryant, Brian Bryant, and Deborah Smith. I will also be using additional resources that I will cite at the end and during the presentation. In this presentation, you have just heard about effective classroom arrangement practices as well as the goals of misbehavior. I am now going to discuss how problem behaviors are assessed and the instructional strategies that are available for us to implement to decrease problem behaviors in the classroom. So when we're in the classroom, there are 4 different steps that we must use in order to complete a functional behavioral assessment. And that's when we identify the behavior and try and put together an intervention to stop it from happening. These 4 steps are from Amanda Morin and her article called Functional Assessment, What is it and How it Works. The first step is defining the inappropriate behavior, so ourselves as teachers have to decide what is the student doing that's interrupting his learning or other students' learning. The second step is collecting, comparing, and analyzing information about the problem behavior. The third step is hypothesizing reasons for the behavior, trying to decide why the student is acting this way. And the fourth step is developing a plan. Once we've identified problem behavior, we must then go into step 2, which is collecting, comparing, and analyzing information. Bryant and Smith explain that observational systems can determine how frequently or how long a problem behavior occurs. One example of how to effectively do this in the classroom is called the antecedent behavioral consequence log. For short, we refer to it as the ABC log. The antecedent is the event that occurs right before the problem behavior. The behavior, B stands for the behavior itself. So what is the behavior of concern? What did we just identify in step 1 as the problem behavior? And C is consequence, and that is the event that happens right after the problem behavior occurs. So right after it occurs, whatever the teacher does or whatever the students does, that's the consequence. Here we have an example of an ABC log from our text. And the teacher writes the date and the time that the event occurs. She jots down what happened right before the event. As you could see that Louisa, Sarah, and Ben just came over for a reading. Then she writes down the problem behavior. So the fact that Louisa had to get up, sharpen her pencil, stops and talks to Ricardo, and then pokes Stephanie with her pencil. And Louisa's wandering around the room, so she's obviously losing out on instructional time. Consequences, like we said before, that's just what happens right after the behavior. So she explains that the teacher says, okay, stop that. And then the teacher goes over to the students to separate them, and Stephanie cries. So she's jotting down what the teacher did, as well as what Stephanie did. And then the last thing she writes down, the consequence, is that Stephanie got sent to the nurse and has a private conference with Louisa, who loses recess for the day. The third step is hypothesizing reasons for the behavior. So we're trying to think of reasons why the student would act this way. This data can help the teacher make informed decisions about why the problem behavior is occurring. Teachers can use graphs, charts, and logs, the log like we just talked about, the ABC log, all as ways to look at their data and decide why they think that this problem behavior is occurring. Knowing why the problem behavior occurs can help us think of a solution. Next, I've included a functional behavioral assessment that I found from PBIS World. And as you could see, the functional behavioral assessment first asks us to describe or take data collection. And we must check the following data items off that were considered by the team. So the team of teachers and professionals in the school that are looking at the students' problem behavior. After that, the behavior is described, and they list and describe the behaviors that adversely affect the student's learning. So in this case, it was running away and aggression towards others. It also asks the team to decide if they think a BIP, or behavior intervention plan, is needed. And then it asks for triggers. So like we said, triggers are factors that usually provoke this behavior. And then they talk about setting factors, so describing when, where, how, with whom, other students, when is this behavior most likely to occur. And then we talk about the function behavior, so consider what happens immediately after the problem occurs. So this is just another way to observe student behavior and decide how we can better accommodate for them in the classroom. As I mentioned on the last slide, the last step is now developing a plan, and once we decide that a student needs a behavior intervention plan, there's a couple of steps that we need to go through in order to make sure that the plan that we implement is most effective for each student. So as Bryant and Smith explained, sometimes specific interventions must be implemented to promote positive behavior in the classroom. And a behavior intervention plan provides teachers with a roadmap for changing inappropriate behavior and teaching new appropriate skills. I think that's really important to remember, that we're not only showing the students what isn't appropriate in the classroom, but rather we're also providing them with a way and a set of skills in order to as well. ADAPT is an intervention method used to address problem behavior in the classroom. I'm going to model this procedure for you, but first I'm going to give you some background on this procedure, how it works, and the scenario that I'm going to use with my student to model this procedure. So first, the background on my student. My student is named Mike, and he leaves his books at school all the time. He forgets to write down his homework, and therefore comes to class with incomplete homework and spends a lot of the class period just trying to find his homework, and he loses out on that instructional time. So in order to help Mike, I'm going to use the ADAPT strategy. So A stands for the teacher asking themselves what they're requiring the students to do. In this case, I expect that Mike comes to school with his homework complete and brings it ready to learn in class. The D stands for determine the prerequisite skills for this class. So what does Mike have to know how to do in order to complete this skill appropriately? So Mike must bring his homework and the materials required to complete his homework home and then back to school again the next day. He must also know what the homework assignments are when he gets home, so he's able to complete them. The A stands for analyze. So the teacher has to analyze the student's strength and struggles. Just like we do when we implement differentiation for instruction, we must do this as well for behavior intervention plans. So I know that Mike struggles to forget to write down his homework completely and leaves many books in school and comes to school without his homework complete. P stands for propose and implement adaptations. So my adaptations for Mike would be to set up an organizational and behavioral plan. So I will set up a method where I have to sign his agenda book at the end of the day to make sure that his assignments are written down correctly and clearly, and that he also gets a checklist when he's packing up for the day, so he makes sure that he brings all the correct materials home, and he can also use this checklist to make sure that he's bringing all the correct materials back to school. He must also be aware of this plan, so I would have to sit down and tell him about the plan as well. And then T stands for test to determine if adaptations help the student. So just like we assess and test our students to see if lessons worked, we also have to do this for the behavior interventions. So the next day, I would check in, make sure that he has his homework complete and he has all of his materials back with him to see if this intervention is effective. Okay, so now I'm going to be modeling for you guys how to implement the intervention portion of the ADAPT model. So this is when we actually try out the procedure that we've come up with and see if it works. So like I said, the first thing I was going to do is check Michael's agenda book to make sure that he has his homework written down properly. So I would check for every subject that he has the right page numbers, the right numbers, and everything's written completely. So perfect. So I'm going to sign my initials on it. And then the second portion of our intervention is that we established a checklist. So this would be at the time when it was time to pack up at the end of the day, and now we have to pack your backpack, so we got to make sure you're bringing the correct materials home. So we're going to use this checklist, so every time you go over into your, every time you put a new folder or notebook into your book, your bag, you're just going to check it off. So first we need to get your math folder, so go ahead. Perfect. All right, then we need your math textbook, and we need your math notebook. And you can check both of those off. Okay, and now when you get home, you can use this same checklist to pack your bag again before coming back to school. There are many different interventions that we can use in order to see an improvement in the behavior of our students. One of them described in the textbook, it was contracting. This was a way to set up a written agreement describing the desired behavior. This could be between a teacher and one student, it could be between two different students in the classroom, or a teacher and 2 or 3 students, whoever is involved in the problem behavior. The criterion specific rewards I really liked because you can choose the rewards in order to best meet the interests and motivation of each individual student. And this intervention deals with students earning privileges, but only as they've reached desired levels of target behavior. So if they behave in the way that they're expected to, then they receive rewards that have been set up for them. ClassPass is an intervention that I got from Intervention Central, and this idea is giving the student a certain amount of passes where they can hand in and go and take a break, whether it be go to a designated portion of the classroom or leave the classroom for a certain period of time. This is for students who get really angry and frustrated and might make a scene in the classroom or start distracting others. And then choice making. This intervention I got from the Iris Center, and I think this could be really useful for many students. It gives these students a way to, and the ability to take ownership of their own work by getting a chance to make choices, and these choices can be given as reward to good behavior as well. I have put here 2 great resources that I actually just mentioned before, the Intervention Central and Iris Center. They both describe excellent behavioral interventions that we can implement in the classroom in order to see student progression of behavior. And here's my references. So that's all that I have for my portion of our presentation. Next, you will hear about social competence and how to create safer schools from our next presenter. Thanks for watching.